A woman tried to steal a K9 from a police car. She had no idea what was waiting inside. The streetlights buzzed faintly, casting long, flickering shadows on the pavement. The city had settled into its late-night rhythm, a mix of distant car horns, the occasional chatter of pedestrians, and the muffled hum of a far-off train. The kind of night where most people had already retreated indoors, where the world belonged to those who lurked in the quiet, those who preferred the cover of darkness. Samantha Blake wasn't the kind of person who took unnecessary risks. At least not anymore. But tonight she had no choice. Her fingers twitched slightly in the pocket of her worn-out hoodie, brushing against the cool edge of a lockpick. It had been years since she'd done something this reckless. She told herself this wasn't about being desperate, this was about survival. She stayed crouched in the alley, her breath slow and measured, eyes locked onto the police SUV parked across the street. It sat there like a fortress, sleek and motionless, its black and white frame reflecting the glow of a nearby neon sign. The emblem on the side, a golden badge with the words, Police K9 Unit, was slightly worn, a testament to the vehicle's years of service. And inside, in the back seat, sat a dog, a powerful, muscular German Shepherd, its ears pricked and alert. Even from here, Samantha could see the intelligence behind its dark eyes. It watched the street, scanning for movement, its breath visible against the window. A well-trained police dog, probably worth a small fortune. She swallowed hard. If she did this right, she could walk away with enough cash to disappear. If she messed up, no, she wouldn't think about that. She had been staking out the area for nearly an hour, watching the officers come and go. The driver had stepped into a 24-hour diner across the street, leaving the dog alone in the vehicle. It wasn't ideal, police cars were built to be secure, but Samantha had spent enough time around criminals to know a thing or two about getting into locked spaces. Her fingers curled around the handle of her bag, the weight of it reassuring. Inside, she had everything she needed: wire cutters, a small pry tool, and an old dog leash just in case. Plan. Her pulse quickened as she took one last look around. The streets were empty. The diner's fluorescent lights flickered in the distance, bathing the sidewalk in a dull glow. No one was watching. It was now or never. She crossed the street quickly, her steps light and practiced. Years of experience, of breaking into cars, of stealing wallets in crowded places, had trained her well. But this wasn't just any car. This was a police vehicle. She reached the SUV and crouched beside the rear door. The K9 inside shifted, tilting its head slightly, but it didn't growl. Not yet. Samantha's hands moved fast. She reached into her bag, pulling out a slim metal tool, sliding it carefully into the door's latch mechanism. She worked quickly, her fingers steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Click. The door popped open, and then silence. She didn't move. She barely breathed. The German Shepherd sat still, its body tense but unmoving, its intelligent eyes locked onto hers. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, she reached for the leash in her bag. "Easy, boy," she whispered, keeping her voice soft. "I'm not here to hurt you." The dog didn't react right away. Its ears twitched. Its eyes remained trained on her every movement. She knew she had seconds before the dog decided whether she was a threat. She had to move carefully, slowly. She reached out just a little farther. And then, a deep, low growl rumbled from the dog's throat, breaking the stillness. A warning. Her breath hitched. The leash trembled slightly in her grip. That's when she heard it. A voice, cold and sharp as a blade, cutting through the night. "You just made the worst mistake of your life." Her stomach dropped. Before she could react, before she could even turn to see where the voice had come from, something hit her hard. A powerful force slammed into her side, knocking her off balance. She barely registered the impact before she felt her back hit the pavement. The wind rushed out of her lungs in a sharp gasp. Pain shot through her ribs as she struggled to regain her breath. Above her, a shadow loomed. Officer Luke Daniels. A tall, broad-shouldered man with the stance of someone who had been through more fights than he cared to count. His uniform stretched over his muscular frame, his badge gleaming under the streetlight. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were sharp, assessing her every move. Samantha tried to scramble backward, but she barely moved an inch before something even more terrifying happened. The K9 lunged. It was fast, faster than she could react. 1 second, it was in the car. The next, it was on top of her, its weight pressing down against her chest, its powerful jaws inches from her face. She froze. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. The dog didn't bite. Not yet, but its growl vibrated through her bones, its breath hot against her skin. "Don't move," Daniel said, his voice like steel, "or he will take a piece of you." Samantha knew enough about K9 training to know that wasn't a bluff. She forced herself to stay still, her muscles screaming to run. Daniels crouched beside her, his gaze locked onto hers. "What the hell were you thinking?" he demanded. Her mouth was dry. She couldn't answer. He grabbed her wrist, flipping it roughly, pinning it against the pavement. "You thought you could just steal a police dog and walk away?" he scoffed. "Tell me, what exactly was your plan here?" Samantha's mind raced. She had to think fast. She had to say something, anything. She started, her voice hoarse. Daniels narrowed his eyes. "Try again," he said. The dog's growl deepened. Samantha swallowed hard. She was trapped, and she had no idea how to get out of this. Samantha's body remained rigid beneath the weight of the K9, its warm breath fanning her face, its sharp eyes locked onto hers. The growl hadn't subsided. It was a warning. A single wrong move and she knew it would strike. Daniels hadn't moved either. His grip on her wrist was firm, his knee pressed slightly into the pavement beside her, his other hand resting on his holster, not drawing his weapon, but making sure she knew it was there. She swallowed, her throat dry. Her voice came out hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Go on," Daniel said, his tone controlled but edged with anger. "You must have thought this through before pulling a stunt this stupid." Samantha's mind raced, but the pressure against her chest made thinking nearly impossible. Her heart pounded in her ears. She could barely get a breath past the lump of panic lodged in her throat. "You don't understand," she finally managed. Daniels scoffed. "Oh, I think I understand just fine. You thought you'd get away with stealing a K9 from a marked police vehicle? What? Did you think he'd just sit there and let you walk him away like some house pet?" He gestured toward the dog. "This isn't some stray you can throw in the back of a van. This is a trained police dog. He's smarter than you. He's more disciplined than you. And he sure as hell isn't going to let some low-life criminal walk away with him." Samantha flinched at the word. Low-life. It wasn't like she hadn't heard it before. It wasn't like she didn't already know what she was. But something about the way Daniels said it stung more than usual. "I wasn't," she started, then stopped herself. "Wasn't what? Wasn't trying to steal him?" Because she was. Lying wouldn't help her now. Daniels shook his head, exhaling sharply through his nose. "Tell me why, then. Because unless you have some brilliant explanation for why you were breaking into a police car, I'm taking you in, and you can explain it to the judge instead." The weight of his words settled into her chest, heavier than the dog pinning her to the ground. Arrest, jail, the very things she had been running from, the very things she had been trying to avoid by doing this in the first place. The irony of it was almost laughable. Almost. "I didn't have a choice," she finally muttered. Daniels arched a brow. "That's a funny thing to say about grand theft." Samantha let out a sharp breath. "You think I wanted to do this? You think I wanted to risk my neck trying to steal a damn dog?" She shook her head, her voice growing more frustrated, more desperate. "I didn't wake up this morning thinking, hey, you know what would be fun? Let me go get myself arrested by messing with a K9 unit." Daniels tilted his head slightly, considering her words, but his face remained unreadable. "Then why did you?" She hesitated. Could she tell him the truth? Could she tell him why she had really done this? Would it even matter? Would he even care? Probably not. But what other choice did she have? She exhaled, the fight leaving her shoulders. "I owe people money." Daniels didn't look impressed. "Yeah, well, that's what jobs are for." She let out a humorless laugh. "You think it's that easy?" You think I haven't tried? You think I haven't been scraping by, doing whatever I can to make ends meet?" She shook her head. "I'm out of options." Daniels studied her for a moment, then glanced down at the dog. With a subtle hand signal, he gave the command for it to back off. The K9 obeyed instantly, lifting its weight off Samantha's chest and stepping back, though it remained close, still watching her with sharp, alert eyes. Samantha let out a shaky breath, relieved to finally be able to sit up. She rubbed her wrists, knowing they would soon be cuffed anyway. Daniels remained crouched, watching her. "How much do you owe?" The question caught her off guard. "What? How much do you owe?" he repeated. His expression hadn't softened, but there was something in his voice that almost sounded like curiosity. She hesitated, then sighed. 20 grand. Daniels let out a low whistle. "That's a lot of debt." "No kidding," she muttered. "Who do you owe?" His voice had shifted slightly, less harsh, more assessing. Samantha hesitated again. The people she owed weren't the kind of people you talked about out loud. But Daniels wasn't going to let this go. She could see it in his eyes. "A guy named Rico," she admitted. Daniels' face darkened instantly. "Rico Vasquez?" She blinked, surprised. "You know him?" Daniels clenched his jaw, his hands resting on his knees. "Yeah, I know him. And if you owe him 20 grand, you've got bigger problems than just stealing a police dog." Samantha swallowed hard, the weight of reality pressing down on her. "Yeah," she whispered. "I know." Daniels stood up slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. "Let me guess. He offered you a deal. Steal something valuable, he clears your debt." She nodded. Daniels sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "Damn it." Samantha frowned. "What? You don't get it, do you?" he said. "If Rico sent you after my dog, that means he's testing how far you'll go. If you'd gotten away with it, he would have found something bigger for you to steal next. And if you failed," he exhaled sharply. "Well, you failed." Samantha's stomach twisted. "You think he's gonna come after me?" Daniels didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled out his phone and started dialing. "Who are you calling?" she asked. He glanced at her. "Back up." Samantha felt a chill run down her spine. "Why? What are you?" "You don't get it," he cut her off, his voice firm. "You're not walking away from this. Not the way you think you are. If Rico sent you after a police K9, that means he's already decided you're expendable. You're a liability now." Her breath caught in her throat. "I can fix it," she said quickly. You won't do anything," Daniels interrupted. "Because in about 5 minutes, you're gonna be in the back of my car, and you're gonna tell me everything you know about Vasquez." Panic flared in her chest. "No," she said, shaking her head. "You don't get it. If I talk, I'm dead." Daniel's jaw tightened. "If you don't talk, you're dead anyway." She froze. He wasn't wrong. She knew how Rico worked, knew how he dealt with people who failed him. She had thought stealing the dog was her only way out. Now she realized she had just sealed her fate. Daniels glanced at his phone as he spoke into it. "Yeah, I've got a suspect in custody, but we've got a bigger problem." A pause. "Yeah, Vasquez." Samantha's chest rose and fell rapidly as reality set in. She wasn't just in trouble. She was in real trouble, and there was no way out of it now. Samantha's breathing was shallow, her mind racing. The world had just shifted beneath her feet. 1 minute, she was trying to steal a police dog. The next, she was staring at the very real possibility that she might not make it through the night. Daniels ended his call, slipping his phone back into his pocket. He watched her carefully, his sharp eyes catching every flicker of emotion that crossed her face. Samantha could tell he was evaluating her, deciding how much of a liability she really was. She needed to think fast. "Look," she started, forcing her voice to stay steady. "I get that I messed up, okay? But I don't need your help. I can take care of myself." Daniels let out a humorless laugh. "Oh, really? You mean the way you just put a target on your own back?" He folded his arms, his stance firm, unwavering. "If Rico Vasquez thinks you failed him, you're as good as dead. And I'm not about to let a body show up on my watch because you were too stubborn to take help when it was offered. Samantha clenched her jaw. I don't need saving. Daniels crouched down again, meeting her gaze. Then what's your plan, huh? You really think you can just disappear? Vasquez owns half the streets in this city. If he wants you found, he'll find you. She bit the inside of her cheek. She hated this. Hated the feeling of being trapped. Hated that Daniels was right. And worst of all, she hated that a part of her actually wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, he could get her out of this. Daniels let the silence stretch for a moment before sighing. You've got two choices, Blake. You either come with me now, cooperate, and maybe, just maybe, we find a way to keep you alive. Or you can take your chances out there on your own. But if you do, I give you 24 hours before Vasquez has someone put a bullet in your skull. His words hit like a hammer. He wasn't exaggerating. She had seen it happen before. People who crossed Rico didn't get second chances. Samantha looked away, staring at the cracked pavement beneath her. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She had been so sure that stealing the K9 would solve her problems. Now, all she had done was trade one death sentence for another. Daniels stood, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. What's it gonna be? Her body tensed at the sight of the cuffs. Instinct screamed at her to run. But where would she go? Nowhere was safe anymore. Finally, she exhaled sharply. Fine, she muttered. But I swear to God, if you try to use me just to get to Vasquez. Daniels cut her off. I don't need you to get to Vasquez, he said flatly. We've been building a case against him for months. But if I can use you to shut him down faster, you bet your ass I'm gonna take that opportunity. Samantha swallowed the lump in her throat. And what happens to me? Daniels hesitated for a beat. We'll figure that out. That wasn't exactly reassuring. Still, she forced herself to stay still as he clasped the cuffs around her wrists. The cold metal bit into her skin, the finality of the moment sinking in. The K9, who had been sitting obediently nearby, let out a quiet huff, as if it, too, had been watching the exchange closely. Samantha cast the dog a wary glance. What's his name? She asked. Daniels opened the door to the back of the police SUV, gesturing for her to get in. Echo. Samantha snorted softly. Fitting. Daniels raised a brow. Why's that? She smirked bitterly as she slid into the back seat. Because he just echoed all my bad decisions right back at me. Daniels didn't smile. He shut the door behind her, locking her in. And just like that, the night that had started with her thinking she was in control had spiraled into something completely out of her hands. As Daniels slid into the driver's seat, the radio crackled to life. A voice came through, another officer, asking for an update. Daniels picked up the receiver. Got the suspect in custody, he said. But we've got a bigger problem. The voice on the other end hesitated before responding. You mean Vasquez? Daniels' grip on the receiver tightened. Yeah, and we need to move fast. Samantha leaned back against the seat, closing her eyes. She had no idea what was coming next. But whatever it was, she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't in control anymore. And that terrified her more than anything. The city blurred past as the police SUV sped down the empty streets, red and blue lights flashing without sirens. Samantha sat in the back, wrists bound in cold steel, Echo sitting in the front passenger seat like a soldier on duty. Every time the dog glanced back at her, it sent a chill down her spine. Daniels was silent, his grip tight on the wheel, his jaw clenched in frustration. Where are we going? Samantha asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniels didn't answer right away. He kept his eyes on the road, taking a sharp turn that made her shift against the seatbelt. Finally, he exhaled, his tone flat. Somewhere safe. Samantha let out a bitter laugh. Safe? You really think anywhere is safe from Vasquez? Daniel's grip on the wheel tightened. It's safer than out there. Samantha shook her head. You don't get it. Vasquez doesn't just find people. He owns people. He owns places. It's not about if he finds me. It's about when. Daniels shot her a glance in the rearview mirror, his expression unreadable. Then you better start giving me something I can use before when gets here. Samantha looked away, staring at the blurred neon lights of the city. She knew how this worked. She wasn't stupid. If she talked, if she gave Daniels anything real, Vasquez wouldn't just kill her. He'd make an example out of her. But if she didn't talk, she was still dead. She let out a long, slow breath. You really want to know why I did this? She asked finally. Daniels didn't respond, but the way he slightly turned his head told her he was listening. Samantha let the words hang in the air for a moment before she spoke again. I had a daughter. Silence. Daniel's fingers twitched against the wheel. Had, he asked, his voice quieter than before. Samantha swallowed the lump in her throat. She hadn't talked about this in years. She wasn't even sure why she was talking about it now. Maybe because she knew she was running out of time. Maybe because, for the first time in a long time, someone was actually listening. She's gone, Samantha said, her voice hollow. Social services took her. Said I wasn't fit to be a mother. Daniels didn't say anything. Samantha let out a shaky laugh. They weren't wrong. Another silence. Daniels sighed, adjusting his grip. That why you got mixed up with Vasquez? Samantha hesitated, then nodded. He offered me money, a way to get back on my feet. Said if I did a few jobs for him, I could set things right. Maybe even get my kid back. Daniels exhaled sharply. And you believed him? Samantha clenched her jaw. I wanted to. Daniels shook his head. Vasquez doesn't give second chances. He owns people just like you said. You work for him, you don't get out. Samantha bit her lip. Yeah, I figured that out too late. Daniels tapped his fingers against the steering wheel. Your daughter, where is she now? Samantha hesitated, her throat tightening. With a foster family, she said finally. A good one, I think. Better than I ever was. Daniels glanced at her in the rearview mirror again. Something in his expression softened for just a second, so fast she almost missed it. Then, just as quickly, his face hardened again. You should have walked away from Vasquez the second you realized what he was. Samantha laughed bitterly. You say that like I had a choice. Daniel's grip on the wheel tightened. He didn't argue. The car turned down a quieter road, the flashing lights finally shutting off. Samantha's stomach twisted. This isn't the station, she said. Daniels didn't answer. Her pulse picked up. Where the hell are we going? Daniels sighed. I told you. Somewhere safe. Samantha yanked against the cuffs. You're supposed to take me in. What, you planning on dumping me somewhere instead? Daniels shot her a look, his voice calm but firm. I don't dump people. Samantha narrowed her eyes. Then what is this? Daniels exhaled, slowing the car as they approached an old, run-down warehouse at the edge of the city. He put the SUV in park, shifting to look at her. This is your only chance to fix this, he said. Vasquez already thinks you're disposable. You're not going to change that. But if you help me bring him down, maybe, just maybe, you walk away from this with more than just a death sentence hanging over your head. Samantha's mouth went dry. He wanted her to flip. She shook her head. No, no way. You don't get it. You don't get what he does to people who cross him. Daniel's expression darkened. Oh, I get it. There was something in the way he said it. Something heavier than just a cop doing his job. Samantha frowned. What did he do to you? Daniels looked at her for a long moment. Then, finally, he said, I had a partner. Her stomach dropped. Echo let out a quiet whine in the front seat, as if he understood exactly what was being said. Daniels didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. Samantha exhaled, rubbing her hands against her knees. Her head was spinning. She was out of options. She could either take her chances with Vasquez, or she could take her chances with Daniels. Neither choice felt safe, but one of them might actually let her live. She closed her eyes. Fine, she whispered. Daniels nodded, and just like that, she had made her choice. Samantha sat in the back seat, staring at the warehouse as dread curled in her stomach. She had agreed to this, agreed to flip to help Daniels take down Vasquez, but the reality of it was starting to settle in. She wasn't sure if she had just saved herself or signed her own death warrant. Daniels stepped out of the car, giving a quick hand signal to Echo, who obediently hopped out of the front seat. Samantha watched through the metal barrier as Daniels walked around to her door. The second he opened it, she tensed. "You can relax," he said, unhooking the cuffs from her wrists. Samantha rubbed at her sore skin, glaring at him. "Relax? I just betrayed one of the most dangerous men in this city. Relaxing isn't exactly an option right now." Daniels gave a short nod, acknowledging her point. "That's why we're here." He motioned toward the warehouse. "Let's go." Samantha hesitated. "What is this place?" "A safe house." She narrowed her eyes. "Doesn't look safe." Daniels let out a small smirk. "That's the point. Vasquez won't come looking for you here." That wasn't exactly comforting. If Vasquez wanted her dead, he'd find a way. But she had burned her bridge. There was no going back now. She climbed out of the car, rolling her shoulders as she took in her surroundings. The warehouse was old, abandoned-looking, covered in rust and faded graffiti. The windows were either broken or boarded up, and the air smelled faintly of damp metal. "Cozy," she muttered. Daniels didn't respond. He led the way inside, pushing open a heavy metal door. The inside was slightly better, bare bones but functional. There was a small setup: a table, some chairs, a few old couches, and a row of lockers against the wall. The lighting was dim, flickering slightly. "Welcome home," Daniels said dryly. Samantha crossed her arms. "So what now? You just keep me locked up here like some witness in a crime drama?" Daniels tossed his keys onto the table. "Not exactly. You're not in custody yet, but until we get what we need on Vasquez, you're staying put." Samantha exhaled sharply, walking toward one of the chairs and sinking into it. Her body ached. From the struggle, from the stress, from the fact that she hadn't eaten since morning. "How long?" she asked. Daniels leaned against the table, arms folded. "Depends. If Vasquez has been keeping a clean operation, this could take months." Her stomach twisted. "And if he hasn't?" Daniel's eyes darkened. "Then it could be over in days." Samantha rubbed her hands over her face. "You really think I can just rat him out and walk away from this?" Daniel's silence told her everything she needed to know. She scoffed. "Great." Echo padded toward her, sniffing at her legs before sitting at Daniel's feet, his sharp eyes still watching her. It was strange. Samantha had spent most of her life around criminals, around liars and manipulators, but that damn dog unsettled her more than any of them. It was like he could see right through her. She looked back at Daniels. "You never told me what happened to your partner." Daniel's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. "Because it doesn't matter." Samantha studied him. "It does to you." A muscle in his jaw twitched, but he didn't argue. Instead, he pushed off the table and walked toward a small metal locker. He pulled something out, a file, and tossed it onto the table in front of her. Samantha frowned, hesitating before flipping it open. Inside were pictures, crime scene photos. A man, another cop, maybe lying in a pool of blood. His badge was still clipped to his belt, his gun just out of reach. A cold chill ran through her. Daniels leaned against the wall, arms crossed. That was Officer Mark Ellis. "My partner." Samantha's stomach twisted. Daniels continued, his voice steady, controlled. "Vasquez had him killed." She swallowed. "Why?" Daniels exhaled. "Because we were close. We had been building a case against him for almost a year. And then Ellis made a mistake. He got too comfortable. Thought he was untouchable." Samantha stared at the photos, her mind spinning. "He wasn't." Daniels finished. Samantha let out a slow breath. "And now you're using me to do what he couldn't." Daniels met her gaze. Yeah, she should have been angry, should have been scared. But instead, she just felt tired. Tired of running. Tired of making the wrong choices. Tired of knowing that no matter what she did, she was always going to be one step away from disaster. She shut the file, pushing it away. "What do you need from me?" Daniels watched her for a moment before answering. "Everything." Samantha leaned back in the chair, staring at the closed file in front of her. Everything inside her was screaming to run, to find a way out before she got pulled deeper into this mess. But it was too late for that. She had made her choice the moment she broke into that police SUV. Daniels watched her carefully, waiting. He had been patient so far, but she could tell that patience wouldn't last forever. "You want everything?" she asked, rubbing a hand over her face. "Yeah," Daniels said. She exhaled. "Fine. But if I do this, I want something in return." Daniels arched a brow. "You're not exactly in a position to negotiate." Samantha met his gaze, unflinching. "If I help you take down Vasquez, you help me disappear. Witness protection, a new identity, whatever it takes to make sure he never finds me." Daniels was silent for a moment, then nodded. "I can make that happen." Samantha searched his face. "You swear?" His expression didn't change. "Yeah." She let out a slow breath. "Then let's do this." Daniels pulled out a notepad and pen. "Start from the beginning. Everything you know about Vasquez, his operations, his people, how he moves his money." Samantha hesitated. She had spent years trying not to think about any of this, trying to pretend she wasn't part of something so dangerous. But now there was no avoiding it. She swallowed hard, then started talking. For the next 2 hours, Samantha detailed everything she knew. She told Daniels about the backroom meetings, the coded messages, the drop points scattered across the city. She told him how Vasquez used legitimate businesses to launder money, how he had half the cops in his pocket, how he always seemed to know when a raid was coming before it happened. She told him about the men Vasquez trusted, the ones who did his dirty work, ruthless, violent men who would kill without hesitation. And she told him about the safe houses, the hideouts, the places Vasquez went when he needed to disappear. By the time she finished, her throat was dry, and her body felt like it had been through a war. Daniels closed his notepad, exhaling slowly. "That's a lot." Samantha let out a humorless laugh. "Yeah, no kidding." He ran a hand through his hair, thinking, if even half of this checks out, it's enough to bring him down. But it's not enough to keep you safe. Samantha frowned. "What do you mean?" Daniels met her gaze. "Vasquez will come looking for you the second he realizes you flipped. We need to hit him first." Her stomach twisted. "How?" Daniels leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "You're going to set him up." Samantha's breath caught in her throat. No way. I gave you everything I know. I'm not walking into a death trap." Daniel's voice was calm but firm. "It's the only way. We need him in a position where we can take him down clean. No way for his lawyers to get him out. No way for his men to cover for him." Samantha's heart pounded. "You're asking me to sign my own death sentence." Daniels shook his head. "I'm asking you to help me end this. Once Vasquez is locked up, you get your new life. No more running. No more looking over your shoulder. But we only get one shot at this." Samantha clenched her jaw, looking away. She had spent so long being afraid of Vasquez, of what he could do. The idea of standing up to him, of being the reason he went down. It was terrifying. But so was the thought of spending the rest of her life running. She took a shaky breath. "What do you need me to do?" Daniels nodded, grabbing his phone. "We set the meet. You tell Vasquez you got the K9, that you're ready to deliver. We make it look real." Samantha's chest tightened. "And then?" Daniel's expression hardened. "And then we take him down." The next evening, Samantha stood outside a rundown motel on the outskirts of the city, her fingers trembling as she held her phone to her ear. "He's expecting my call," she muttered. Daniels stood a few feet away, watching her closely. Echo sat by his side, unmoving. They were ready. Samantha inhaled sharply and dialed Vasquez's number. It rang twice before he picked up. "Samantha," Vasquez said smoothly. "I was starting to think you were dead." Her throat tightened. Almost was. A short chuckle. "I assume you have my dog?" She forced herself to sound steady. "Yeah, I have him. But things got messy. I need to meet. Tonight." A pause. "Then where?" Samantha glanced at Daniels. "The old shipping yard." "Midnight," Vasquez hummed. "And you're sure you weren't followed?" Her stomach twisted. "Yeah, I'm sure." Another pause. Then, "Fine. Midnight." The line went dead. Samantha exhaled shakily. "It's done." Daniels nodded. "We move in before he does." He'll have men with him, but we'll be ready. Samantha clenched her fists, nodding. This was it. One way or another, it ended tonight. The shipping yard was empty when they arrived, silent except for the distant crash of waves against the dock. Daniels and his team were hidden, weapons drawn, eyes locked on the entrance. Samantha stood alone in the center, her hands clenched into fists to keep them from shaking. Echo sat beside her, his ears pricked, his body tense. Headlights appeared in the distance. A black SUV rolled through the gate, its tires crunching against the gravel. Samantha's heart pounded as the car came to a stop. The doors opened. Vasquez stepped out, flanked by two men. He was tall, dressed in a crisp suit, his dark eyes calculating as he studied her. "Samantha," he said, his voice almost amused. "I have to admit, I wasn't sure if you'd actually show." She forced herself to meet his gaze. "I have your dog. Now I want my money." Vasquez smirked. Of course, he reached into his jacket. That was the signal. "Now!" Daniel's voice rang through the night. A dozen armed officers swarmed the yard, their weapons raised. "Hands where I can see them." Vasquez barely flinched. His expression darkened, but he didn't resist as two officers grabbed him, forcing him to his knees. Samantha let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. It was over. Vasquez was done. Daniels walked toward her, nodding. "Good job." Samantha swallowed. "So, what now?" Daniels gave her a small, almost approving smile. "Now, you get that new life you wanted." For the first time in years, she felt something close to hope. Maybe, just maybe, she had finally outrun her past.